This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks, good morning. Good to see you all here today. Thank you for attending. So today we're going to be looking at chapter 25. And so in chapter 25, let's go up here as far as for the origin of life. So we're looking at, and we've been looking at as far as phylogenetic trees, as far as the evolution of the living of life here on Earth, and as far as that theory is concerned. And know that as far as when we talk about this, like I said before, that it's a matter of we're not trying to change anybody's faith system or belief system, but we want you to understand and know, as far as in the study of the biological sciences, this is one of the foundational principles that that the biological sciences would teach you as far as the origin of life and evolution and what's taking place as far as macro and microevolution. And so what we're looking at here in chapter 24, we're looking at the phylogenetic trees and seeing how, as far as one common ancestor, we could have changes occur over long periods of time. So we're talking in terms of millions of years, right? And really what we're looking at as far as the origin of the Earth itself, they're looking at, billions of years. Understand that, okay? So we're talking many, many years having change take place and mutation take place and changes occur, creating different species. That's what we looked at as far as those phylogenetic trees are concerned. This chapter, we're looking at chapter 25, the origin of life, and seeing the origin from a chemistry basis, from a chemical basis. And so, oh, you know what? Let me just show you this here as far as just as a point of, there we go. Okay, so when I teach human biology, when I teach anatomy and physiology, we look at what's taking place as far as the structural organization of the human body, right? And so we can see here as far as, let's look at, sorry. Oh, here we go. I'll show you that. There we go. Okay, and save this and make it bigger so we look at it. And I showed you this in chapter 38. But just seeing here as far as realizing that the organization of the human body, we also think of this as the organization where life throughout the planet and such. And for the human body, we take it from the very atomic level, right? From the chemical level to the cellular level, and then to the tissue level, to the organ level, to the organ systems, and then to the organism. So the organism, the human organism, and look at this cute little baby, right? We see here as far as this little child here has multiple organ systems. Urinary system is one, cardiovascular system, the nervous system, all examples of different systems comprised of what? Different organs. So we have here the urinary bladder. This urinary bladder is comprised of what? Different types of tissues. So this tissue, we're looking at one example of the tissue, the smooth muscle, and then the muscle tissue and other types of tissues are comprised of different cells. These cells are what? Comprised of these different chemical at the atomic level, the protons, neutrons, electrons, and then as we go more up to the actual organic compounds as far as carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and primarily it's proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and here you see an example of a nucleic acid, a DNA molecule, and we'll be talking about a little bit about transcription and translation today regarding how within these cells there'll be a reading of this genetic material which will help to produce proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and other nucleic acids and such. So but just showing you here how really we're looking at from the more simple to the more complex as we go up into creating this particular human organism, okay? But right now, what we're going to be looking at in this chapter here, as far as chapter 25, is really focusing on more of really the chemical origins of life and such. And so you'll see right here, this is a cool image as far as showing you calcium carbonate alkaline vent chimney, okay? And know that there are archaea. do you recall when we looked at as far as domains are concerned, right? The domains would be domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Well, at the domain level, so we have the eukaryotic organisms. So you and I would be considered a eukaryotic organism in that we have these eukaryotic cells, which are cells that are comprised of membrane-bound organelles, a nucleus with genetic material present within a nuclear membrane, and then other membranous type of organelles present within the cell. Okay? Whereas, and multicellular, but it can also be single cells. As far as archaea is concerned, and bacteria, these are also the other two domains. And archaea in particular are these ancient types of prokaryotic organisms, right? That that do not have membrane-bound organelles. So they're different. They're similar to. All right. Folks, can you hear me now? There was some kind of glitching going on. I'm getting a new computer this week, and they were doing work with me. So you can't hear me right at the moment. I do apologize. I'm sorry. I just noticed I came up on the screen there. Can someone put on their microphone a moment and just tell me where you stopped hearing me say, the audio, please?
I believe it was at the calcium vents.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, folks. Very frustrating as far as I had IT work on my computer, and like I said, I'm receiving a new computer as of this week here, so I apologize. All right, so let me go back into the PowerPoint there. I'll hide everyone. Do apologize. Yeah, all right, we'll go from there. Share the screen. Okay, folks, so coming back to this as far as we're looking at this image here as far as in the very beginning of the PowerPoint and seeing as far as the calcium carbonate alkaline vent chimneys and realizing that there are organisms that will live in this environment, right? So a colony of archaea. So recall that we've discussed and talked about the domains as far as the eukarya, the archaea, as far as the bacteria are concerned. And know that the archaea are considered the ancient types of very similar to bacteria. They are prokaryotic organisms. They are organisms that do not have membrane-bound organelles present within the cell. Okay, so we're looking at as far as eukarya, so the animal kingdom, plant kingdom. We're looking at as far as eukarya would have membrane-bound organelles like a nucleus, the nuclear membrane with the genetic material encapsulated within. Okay, and then we're looking at membrane-bound organelles also present within the cell of a eukarya. as far as archaea are concerned, right? So these are living in extreme environments, okay? It's very similar in composition as bacteria. Again, no membrane-bound organelles present within these cells. And you'll see living in an environment. So 90 degrees, we're looking at 194 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is not as hot as some of the other descriptions of the hot vents that are mentioned within the chapter here. But the pH, right, we're looking at pH of 11. So it's on the alkaline aspect of it. So greater concentration of hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. We'll take a look in just a moment here as far as review of the pH scale. And we'll see that there are present also these transparent worms and bivalves. Like, so an example would be a clam, oyster, that kind of thing would be a bivalve, less than 1 centimeter long, and really using the colony of archaea present in these vent chimneys for their food source. So quite fascinating, quite interesting. And so you'll see here as far as the thoughts, the theories behind that, quite possibly could this be where life originated in these areas and such. And so really when you're thinking of science, we're continually asking questions. We're asking questions to try and study and research and know more. Okay, so know that, you know, as we do studies, as we create these hypotheses that we're trying to determine, well, in the case of evolution and such, you know, how are there the thoughts behind the theory of the origin of life, right? And that's what this chapter is about. And so this is the continual trying to critically think and analyze and do research in order to see, well, could life possibly originate? And you'll see these terms, possible, right? Could, because were we there? No one was there, but we're trying to then take the information and that we have with us and that trying to create these different hypotheses in order to determine, well, could this have happened, or quite possibly could this not have happened? So let's look here as far as, so in comparison, we're thinking of as far as the origin of life from outside of our planet, the Earth, right? The Big Bang Theory, and talk of that really present within our universe, right? That our planet is comprised of elements of stars and such, right? So you'll see here as far as vast explosion 14 billion years ago. I mean, again, these are thoughts, these are theories behind what could possibly have allowed for our planet to be so very unique and have life present within it and on it, and realizing that you'll see here as far as nuclear reactions in stars generated the major elements we find in present day biological molecules. So knowing that really like the stardust, so to speak, you might have heard that before, use that term, that's really what comprises what the world and the earth is comprised of and made of. And that, you know, so you're thinking that from there, the chemical soup that was present upon the planet of inorganic chemicals and molecules then come together over a period of time in conditions, unique conditions that could quite possibly lead to the formation of life on Earth. Again, these are theories, and this is the basis of evolutionary theory. So you'll see here as far as, right, elements that needed to be present in order for life conditions to occur and upon which life would come out of, okay? So continual source of energy. So the sun, right, having that factor. So in other words, that when the earth was created also then and produced as a result of this Big Bang, right, they would say then that the sun and other planets were also conceived, produced, created, and as a result, the sun provides this heat source and also the structure upon which all the other planets are rotating around and such, and having their ability to receive energy from what's being produced and released by the sun, and also the ability to create water, to have this water creation, so that with water, with heat, with the source of energy, then other conditions can occur which life, and in particular, this term, these protocells, right? These primitive cell structures. So similar to what we would think when we think of the cell today, but different. Now know that as we go on in this semester here, I started off the semester looking at humans, right? Human anatomy and physiology, and just giving you a very brief touch chapter regarding what's going on as far as structurally and physiologically the human body. And then we're going to be looking back. Now we're coming back as far as we're starting with evolution, and then we'll be going into microbiology and discussing a little bit regarding bacteria and viruses and such. And I think this is going to be a great semester. It'll be a quite interesting semester for you all. You'll learn a lot, and I think that you really appreciate more what's going on as far as life here on our planet. But getting back to this here, so we'll be talking more about the cell, and we'll be talking more about the different types of bacteria and archaea. We will discuss that as far as we've already looked at eukarya, the eukaryotes, cells present in animals and plants and such. But you'll see here these protocells, right? So these are these cells, these foundational cells upon which then the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes have developed today. Okay, so you'll see here as far as the prokaryotic cells were present at about 3.5 billion years ago is what their estimate would be as far as from an evolutionary basis, as far as again, many years, billions of years, millions of years, in order for change to occur, in order to get from the very simple protists that we looked at as far as in the tree of life, right, and last chapter there, till we get to the more complex organisms that we see as far as in the species today. Okay. And again, look at here, it says the earliest events are uncertain, but probably, right? So, you know, this is just their in science, you know, our theories behind, well, what's occurred, what could have taken place. So we weren't back then, but we're here now, so we can study what's here now to try and understand what happened back then. And this is what takes place and what's going on as far as different research is concerned. Okay? So you'll see here as far as billions of years ago, so we're looking at the formation of the Earth, right? So, you know, less than 5 billion years ago is what their estimates are. And then getting into organic molecules, which would progress and get to, you see here, earliest cellular life. And what we're seeing here, folks, is that there's some type of genetic material present within the cells, first within the prokaryotic and then eukaryotic cells, and then mitosis, mitotic division, and meiosis, division of gametes, like the different cells involved in sexual reproduction for organisms, realizing that reproduction is vital for life. Okay, that is one of the major characteristics of life, reproduction. And so we're seeing here as far as photosynthesis, as far as oxygen increasing rapidly within the atmosphere. So going from it now, and know that like at present time, so we're looking at an atmosphere that you and I breathe in, you know, high percentage of nitrogen, around the 70 percentile, oxygen about the 20 some odd percentile, as far as the different gases that are present that we breathe in and such. So realize, you know, the non-science major, the person who is just a lay student who would have no idea regarding science per se, would have no idea that really the oxygen that we're breathing, the atmosphere that we're breathing, it's not primarily oxygen, it's nitrogen. Just know that as far as chemical components are concerned. Unicellular eukaryotes, we have here then multicellular eukaryotes, and again, coming up to the present day as far as with the different types of animal and plants present within life on the planet. So you'll see here as far as with this chapter, again, helping you to understand that when through evolutionary theory, they believe that chemicals, right, non-living, became through a series of events and series of conditions could produce the molecules that are necessary for life to occur, to life to become what it is as of today. Okay, so really from these unique conditions, and we're going to see how in this chapter it talks about experimentation that's being done and that has been done in the past to try and create conditions that they believe occurred many years ago in order to allow for the conditions for life to occur, right? you'll see here as far as there must have been a transition from non-living to living matter, although we lack direct evidence on how it occurred. But again, there can be these hypotheses present in order to think about and to try and determine what could possibly have happened and what conditions could quite possibly have been in place in order for these conditions to be just right in order for life to occur. Okay? You'll see here as far as life originating from non-living matter on Earth through chemical and physical processes, right? Very similar to, right, those that are occurring today, but still could have been different. And so this is what then the different hypotheses that are present in order to determine, well, what could have occurred. And know that you'll see here as far as thinking, postulating about what was present in the environment those billions of years ago, as far as quite possibly initially the planet was covered in more of a liquid molten type situation instead of really, this would be a precursor to water and precursor to land masses on the Earth. Okay, so volcanic activity, releasing gases, so carbon dioxide, hydrogen, nitrogen, right, from the crust and the mantle. So the mantle deep within, right, of the Earth, and then the crust is then the next layer out, would help to form the first atmosphere. Okay, water vapor emitted from the volcanoes, right, and that volcanic activity, helping to form first oceans. Like, so water being produced as a result of the conditions just being right in order for then life, then the conditions to be correct then for life to occur. So the necessity of water being present, liquid water in particular. And what I've shown you here, we'll come back in just a moment. Provided, here we go. Yeah, so I took this image offline, and I wanted you to see here as far as just understanding the uniqueness that takes place on our planet, as far as the ability to have water being present for life to be present also, and for life to continue, right? Right now, at present, I'm taking a blood pressure medication that also contains a diuretic, right? In order to decrease my blood volume, in order to decrease my blood pressure, as well as other types of medication present within that one medication. And realizing necessity for water, it really, if you've ever been in an environment where you've really been very thirsty and needed water, and you're just like, you don't have access to it, right? Realizing that water is vital for life and vital for the human body. And we are comprised primarily of like a good 60 some odd %, right, of water, the human body, as well as other organisms throughout the planet. And realizing also, if you've ever, we love watching documentaries and watching programs where it shows different environments throughout the planet, right? And seeing how life can still be present and in desert environments. Have you ever watched any programs regarding that, and how the organisms that are present in that desert type environment where there's very little water, but there still can be water present, right? They're able to conserve and do what they can in order to use as little water as they have present and access to in order to survive. But without water, you know, you will not survive. And seeing here as far as the cycle of water, as far as how we have, and know that the water that you and I can drink that is not salt water is a very small percentage of the water present throughout the world, right? Very small percentage. And you'll see here as far as the evaporation that takes place in the water as a result of the heat and the sun, you know, sending its rays to and warming up the water and allowing for evaporation to occur. Condensation will occur and allow for then clouds to take place, where then clouds will then release their water as far as precipitation is concerned and contribute to the cycle. And you'll see here as far as the groundwater is the potable water that we're able to drink. The ocean waters, where primarily the earth is covered in not potable water, not water that we're able to take care of. In the case of anatomy and physiology, we learn how drinking salt water can actually lead to a very slow and painful death, because of the fact that it helps to, drinking the salt water will increase the salt content within the plasma, the liquid portion of our blood, which will then remove the water from the red blood cells, your erythrocytes, and allow then for there to be less and less red blood cells present in order to move oxygen throughout the body, water, and the composition of water, how different it can be. Whereas if we have water that's potable, we're able to drink it and allow for life. Yet drinking salt water can lead to death. Yet life for many on the planet, as far as organisms that live within the saltwater environment. So let's come back here again. Okay. Right, and so you'll see here as far as liquid water, essential for biological system, essential for life here on planet Earth. You'll see here also that as far as this gaseous atmosphere, right, the Earth's gravitational pull as far as revolving around the sun and such, and the rotation of the Earth on its own axis creates this gravity that we have on the planet here, right? Allowing for the conditions to be right for us to have this gaseous atmosphere, right? And then the temperatures necessary for liquid water to be present on the planet. Again, vital for life. And you'll see here as far as also in this very early on atmosphere that was created, right? You'll see here as far as oxygen reacting with the elements of the crust and forming these oxides, right? So having this very unique atmosphere present in order then to allow for conditions to occur to allow for the precursor, the very beginning of life to take place. So spontaneous reactions of hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, producing ammonia and methane, right? Allowing for, now this is interesting because you'll see this as far as in the experiment that was created in order to determine what could be the precursors for life to occur, right? As far as you see here, sunlight, electrical discharges, radioactivity, geological heat sources. So we're thinking of the volcanic situations here. We're thinking of radioactivity that could have been present as far as within the different elements that were present on the Earth, as far as the electrical discharges, as far as different types of lightning and such to take place on this very volatile atmosphere and environment in early Earth, and as well as sunlight also sending the UV rays to the Earth here. All of these sources of energy in combination with the unique atmosphere and then the inorganic molecules coming together to form, we say here, approximately 4.5 billion years ago, organic molecules. Okay, so when we think of organic molecules, we think of molecules that contain carbon and hydrogen in particular, that can form the organic molecules, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids. So first, there was this hypothesis, right? So how could quite possibly the Earth have had these specific conditions present in order for life to occur, right? So Alexander Oparin, Haldane come together, right? And back in the 20s here, proposed that the Earth had this strongly reducing atmosphere comprised of hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and water. Okay, and what's going on as far as this reducing atmosphere here, right? So many electrons, hydrogens, for reduction reactions, which could create organic molecules from inorganic elements and compounds. Right. So you'll see here. Let's look here as far as oxidation reduction reactions. I don't know how many of you have taken chemistry yet or involved right now at present in taking chemistry. Some of you, usually it's a matter of taking Chem 1 with Bio 1, Chem 2 with Bio 2, but everybody's in a different plan, so I don't know. But here, just giving you just a little bit of an idea, understanding regarding. So at the atomic level, we have protons, neutrons, and electrons. Electrons will circulate, right? We'll have a fields that they will be moving surrounding the protons and neutrons in the nucleus of the atom. Okay. Now know that as far as when we say reducing and oxidizing, so there's a term that we'll use called oil rig, right? The mnemonic for oxidation and reduction. Okay. So reducing agents will lose electrons, and then oxidizing agents will gain electrons. Okay, so there's this movement of and this change of the different compounds and structures that are present within the atmosphere. Okay, as a result of this reduction reactions that are taking place within the atmosphere, right? Could create these organic molecules. So again, creating organic from inorganic, creating organic molecules that contain carbons and hydrogens in chains of and in different presentations to create the carbohydrates, the proteins, lipids, and the nucleic acids. Now, you'll see here as far as initially here, right? So again, when you saw that term oxidizing, meaning that we're actually gaining electrons, and know that oxidatively, like you need oxygen present and such. And so you see here is that the early atmosphere, they're saying that hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and water are present, and that the absence of oxygen essential for this to occur. Okay, so if oxygen were present, newly formed molecules would break down as a result of oxidation is concerned. Okay, you'll see here as far as again, so reducing atmosphere. There's loss of oxygen, there's gain in hydrogen, gain in electrons, different type of environment as far as, and again, in the absence of oxygen, we would say that this reducing atmosphere is present, only containing hydrogen and not containing the absence of oxygen, containing hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and water. So they hypothesized that organic substances would have accumulated, becoming so concentrated in, have you ever heard of this primordial ooze, this prebiotic soup, right? And so this would occur where we would have these substances present that could eventually then, the right conditions being present in order for organic molecules to occur, which could actually then, again, bring about life. Knowing that, you'll see here, highly concentrated organic molecules would aggregate, and what do we say here? By chance, because again, what else could occur but a matter of just, taking some, because realizing that from non-living to living, there's, that's kind of there's a big stretch there trying to determine, well, how could this quite possibly have occurred? So some combinations might carry out one or more primitive reactions characteristic of life, right? And then and as a result of, when we're talking about evolution, we're also talking about whether as a result of reactions that were very positive and continue to take place, or some reactions that were not as successful, would not. So through a natural selective process, even present at the very foundation of life here, some combinations might compete successfully against less efficient combinations. So we would say that that's a theory that, for something to be passed down and continued on throughout the existence of life here on Earth, that there would be competition, and that some reactions, some combinations would be successful, others not as successful. So those that were successful would continue on, whereas those were inefficient and less successful would not continue on. Okay. Now, taking that theory and creating an experiment to try and test this theory, right? And this is really what science is about also, is that we're trying to take these critical thinking, we're trying to take a theory, a thought, a process, a question, and how can we come about to actually say, hey, yes, the conditions were right, and we can show it through scientific experimentation that it could occur or could not occur. So back in 1953, Stanley Miller and Urey, I forgot his first name there, but come together and to form this experiment. And this experiment is pretty interesting in that they created this apparatus that after 1 week of running, up to 15% of the carbon, right, was in the form of organic compounds, including amino acids. Again, these amino acids would be considered in these organic compounds the building blocks for life. So as far as transcription and translation is concerned, taking place within the nucleus and the cytoplasm of the cell, we take these amino acids will come together and form proteins. Okay. You'll see here, as far as here is an example of the experiment that took place here. And you'll see that as far as we take water, so again, saying that, water is essential for life. So we have water, we have the environment present where we're heating the water, right? So we have then what's taking place. So we have evaporation, it's being collected in an area here of the experiment where we actually have these energy is being introduced to the environment. And then we have a condenser here, which takes this material that exits from the area where energy is introduced, right? And we end up having then what? Condensation will occur. This is cooled, right? And so then this area here, this atmosphere will then be cooled. Water will come out of into the solution here, right? And we're going to have an area where it's an experiment where it's a cycle that's occurring. So very similar to what they would believe would have taken place back billions of years ago. Okay. So this is just the experiment. Now, there are different scientists that will say, well, they've taken that experiment and they've modified it and done different things with it as far as the levels of different gases that are present. So you'll see here as far as present within this atmosphere of the experiment, right? So it's the methane, the ammonia, the water, and the hydrogen gases are present within here. And they've tweaked the type of gases and the percentages of the gases that are present in order to see as far as how they can then as a result of this experiment, have these building blocks being present within these basic organic compounds being present so that they could again produce and contribute to the formation of life here on the planet. Hydrothermal vent theory here. Okay, so current theory that life developed near hydrothermal vents in the seafloor. Now, so they'll say that some of these vents are very hot. So in your text there talked about the hot vents in comparison to these alkaline hydrothermal vents, which are not as hot. You'll see here that the theory behind the hydrothermal vents, right? Scientists will say that, well, organic molecules are destroyed at the high temperatures that are present at those hydrothermal vents, so that there's disagreement regarding, well, could life occur there? But they would say in these alkaline hydrothermal vents, not as hot, so it's cooler, and a different pH present, and this could quite possibly be the environment for life to begin and to occur. And again, that's from looking at, again, we'll come back to this image in just one moment, slide, but seeing here as far as this is an example of those alkaline vents there. Okay, all right. So what I wanted to show you now is just give you a couple of slides that I added to your PowerPoint regarding just seeing how, as far as we have protein structure is concerned, right? So you'll have primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary protein structures, and we get from the more simpler to the more complex protein structural components. And know that from proteins, we're able to then also produce the carbohydrates, the lipids, and the nucleic acids present within all living organisms, right? And so you'll see here as far as quite interesting how the complexity that can occur from the primary to the quaternary stage, or not stage, but structurally components of proteins are concerned. You'll see here as far as carbohydrates also, you're seeing here carbon, you're seeing hydrogens, as well as oxygen and other in chain as far as in their bonds that are being created, as far as covalent bonds are concerned, sharing of electrons between the different components here of. So you'll look at as far as we look at the primary protein structure to the more complex quaternary, you're seeing here as far as, so we'll see simple sugars, and glucose is a very important simple sugar present for living organisms to be able to allow for respiration, cellular respiration to occur. We'll store the monosaccharides present within the living structure of the body. So in the case of humans, So we're storing glucose, any excess glucose that we receive, right, as far as nutrition is concerned, as what? As polysaccharide, so as a more complex carbohydrate. And this will be, as far as glycogen is a way that we'll store glucose present. And when we need it, it'll be stored within the liver and the skeletal muscle of the body. And we'll break it down as a result of processes in order to then have the glucose being present in order to allow for it to enter into the cells. So the cells of the organism, in particular, we're talking about humans, we just see that glucose is vital for, as a monosaccharide carbohydrate, for the cells to really allow for the cellular respiration to occur, the nutrition that's needed for those cells to do that function, but we'll store it as far as a polysaccharide, a more complex type of carbohydrate. Here we're seeing that we can create a disaccharide, right, 2 sugars, from a monosaccharide. And I'm going to show you in a moment here, you'll see as far as chemical reaction, how this can occur as far as we're looking at synthesis of these more complex carbohydrates. Here we're looking at fat, lipids, okay? And we're seeing here also as far as when you look over here, right, at a lipid bilayer. This is 2 layers, right, of a fat, a lipid, and this is really the component of the cellular membrane or the plasma membrane of the cells within the living organism. Okay? And you're seeing how we have this component is present and allows for then all the material present within the cell, right? When we're talking about a eukaryotic organism, as well as prokaryotic organisms, different type of cellular wall and membrane structure, but very similar to, but allowing for fats to allow for the material, the cytoplasm, the guts of the cell to stay within, okay? That's what the cellular membrane is. And so lipids are a very important, crucial component of life. And nucleic acid, so these are present within the nucleus of the cell, or in the case of prokaryotes, and bacteria and such, they're in areas of the cell, right? Specific areas that will have these components so that we can reproduce, okay? We can reproduce, we can create proteins, which in turn we can create carbohydrates and lipids and other nucleic acids and such. And you'll see here as far as that these bases are present here, these base pairings will occur in order to then take and really translate in the core as far as proteins are concerned, protein synthesis. We're able to take an RNA sequence here with unzipping of this DNA sequence in order to create a certain chemical combination of these bases in order to eventually then, in the interaction with ribosomes, produce a protein in the cytoplasm of the cell. So here you're looking at as far as, so when we're thinking of, all right, so if the origin of life, we have these chemicals coming together, right? Then we have to then have, well, when these chemicals come together, they have to produce a cell in some form, whether it's that prokaryotic cell or that eukaryotic cell. And again, we would say the eukaryotic cell is an even more complex type of structure in order to create life here on the planet. But know that even at the very basics, that prokaryotic cell, and like we were looking at as far as the tree of life last chapter there, that again, it's the protist, that prokaryotic shell that acts as the basis, the root upon which all life will branch off of and evolve from, okay? Let's see here. As far as, so researchers have proposed that several processes by which organic building blocks can assemble into these macromolecules. You know, we take these amino acids and we produce these proteins. We take these monosaccharides, we produce polysaccharides. We take carbon, we take hydrogen, we take oxygen, and other types of elements there, and we're able to produce these organic molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acid. Now it says here by both evaporation and condensation reactions, we can produce these polypeptide chains from amino acids, polysaccharides from monosaccharides, nucleotides and nucleic acids from these bases, ribose and phosphates. And you'll see here as far as that you have, here's the sugar, right? We have these phosphates and as well as these nitrogenous bases that will all come together to form really it's the recipe upon which life is produced, and in particular what proteins are produced, and eventually then carbohydrates, lipids, and nucleic acids, other nucleic acids. I talked about this and showed you this regarding the water cycle and seeing how, again, it's cyclical, right? And so that, and know this, and I don't know if you thought much about this at all, but realizing that the amount of water that is present on the earth today and in its creatures that live within the earth, right? Because again, saying that humans are approximately 60% water volume, because know that the blood, primarily it's water composition, your cerebral spinal fluid, water composition, the cytoplasm of the cell, which your body is composed of, right? Organism, organ systems, organs, tissues, cells, right? So all of these, the cells that are present within your body, a good portion of that cell is water, right? The cytosol, which is present within the cytoplasm, the guts of the cell. All of this water is still present on the earth today, from the very beginning to now, to today, to present day. The percentage of water that was there from the beginning to now, folks, we're just recycling the water. And so, know that this is what's taking place, so that this water is still the same water that was present from the very beginning. It's pretty cool stuff, right? And think about it. It's just that it's in the water where it might have began and where it is now, present within organisms and such, and present within the ocean, the groundwater, the rivers, the streams, wherever it may be, the glaciers and such, right? Snow, within the clouds. This is all from the very beginning. It's still here from till present day. So dehydration synthesis, right? So we're taking, and really what's happening if you dehydrate something. So if you have one of those dehydration units, you can put meat, you can put fruit and vegetables in it. And what'll happen if you dehydrate something? You do what? You're removing water, are you not? Right? So you're taking, and what can happen as far as dehydration synthesis is concerned, so we can have these monomers, these small molecules, and interacting with water will do what? Will not interacting with water, but interacting with each other, as and energy being a major component of this reaction, will then produce a polymer, a much more larger molecule with water as a product also. Okay, so let's take a look here as far as we're looking at monosaccharides, and we're producing what? A disaccharide. And as a result of this disaccharide being produced and energy being a component of this reaction, we will produce this disaccharide with water as also a product. So the disaccharide and water will be the products of these two monosaccharides with energy being a component of the reaction to produce what's the products present there. All right, as far as the essence of life, right? Really, the true issue here is, all right, so we have life, but then in order for it to be, one of the characteristics of life would be reproduction, right? And not only just having life be created, but then it has to perpetuate. And how do we perpetuate it? But by reproduction. And know that as far as cells are concerned, whether it's through, like bacteria, through binary fission, we have one cell and it produces two cells, right? As a result of, and we'll talk about fission and such, binary fission, when we get into microbiology within next chapter or so. But as far as for eukaryotic organisms, we're talking about mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis for all the cells of the body except for the sex cells. So the sperm and the egg would be produced as a result of meiotic division. Similar type of mitosis, but producing more of these gametes, these sex cells, okay? But again, it's reproduction. That's the issue here. So organic polymers, necessary prerequisite for life, but really the essence would be then that ability to reproduce, and it's this genetic information. So this genetic material. So what the hypothesis that are present would say, well, it didn't start off as DNA, but it's more along the lines of an RNA type of structure. Okay, and so you're looking here, says this molecular replicators, molecules able to store and reproduce genetic information. So precursors to RNA and DNA. Okay. you'll see here as far as this RNA world model, this would be this hypothesis. In order for then replication to occur, right, you'll have these types of, a type of ribosome. So know that ribosomes are involved in protein synthesis within the cells of the organisms, living organisms, right? Now, ribosomes function both as informational and catalytic type molecules present within these early types of living cells, these protocells, okay? Now you'll see here as far as they can develop by chance. Now again, too, right? Like, so understanding all the components of how this can occur, well, chance through proper certain conditions can allow then for the assembly of these RNA nucleotides, right? Taking part in metabolic reactions within these basic early cells present, in order then for these, then for it to react, these ribozymes and such, to react very similar to messenger RNA and ribosomal RNA. Let's take a look at an image here, just give you as far as what we're looking at. And again, know that we take what we have today and then we create hypotheses regarding what could have happened at the very beginning, right? And so that's what we have been doing and trying to do as far as through evolutionary biology. That's what the theories are based upon. And seeing that as far as this would be the nucleus of a eukaryotic organism, right? Because we have here a nuclear membrane containing the contents of the nucleus and the nucleolus containing RNA present, okay? Ribosomes present, ribosome synthesis taking place within the nucleosome, the very inner portion of the nucleus itself. Here's this nucleoplasm. We have here DNA molecules, which will be unzipped, okay, and allow then for a transcribing to take place of the DNA. You see here the base pairs, the bases pairing with the messenger RNA, creating this messenger RNA, which will exit from the nucleus, enter into the cytoplasm, right, interact with a ribosome, as well as this transfer RNA, which codes for amino acids. These chains will come together as a result of the ribosome interacting with the messenger RNA, creating proteins. You see how like these ribozymes are precursors to the RNA and DNA as far as the hypothesis of the RNA world model is concerned. Okay? So again, I just added this here just to kind of help you to understand and think of so what's going on as far as the eukaryotic cells today in DNA and RNA, and then thinking back to, well, precursors to transcription and translation. This is what the postulate is here as far as these ribosomes acted as both the templates and the catalysts for the RNA molecules to be produced and for life to occur. In the RNA world, DNA would develop as a subsequent step, again, and again, you'll see here at some point, we don't know when this point is, but at some point, DNA nucleotides pairing with RNA informational molecules were assembled into complementary copies of the DNA sequence, the RNA sequences. So once DNA copies were made, so again here, we're talking about this natural selection. So favoritism of positive reactions that would be favorable over time, right? So selection may have favored DNA as the informational storage molecule. Again, talking about the whole theory of natural selection from the very beginning at the chemical component all the way till present day, allowing for greater chemical stability. So you see here how really they're saying how from the ribozymes to RNA, then to DNA, and then DNA being more favorable as far as the chief storage molecule for the information upon which then proteins will be produced as a result of their interaction with RNA through transcription and translation. Again, time, selection, chance, these are all factors involved in how they're making the hypothesis regarding evolutionary biology as far as life is coming about. Some RNAs have acted as the transfer RNA-like molecules and linking the amino acids and pairing them with. So do you see how, again, the thoughts behind this is what's taking place now, transcription and translation, and the thoughts of, as far as this hypothesis is concerned, what could have been the precursors allowing for this to eventually be the naturally selected preferred um, method of the reproduction of cellular components in living organisms. Okay. So enzymatic activity, so the analysis of ribosomes shows that enzymatic activity that forms peptide bonds between the amino acids is a function of one of the RNA molecules of the, so you'll see here that the bonds between and really bonding the amino acids together in chain and in sequence here would be what's called peptide bonds. Peptide bonds are here. Okay, there's right here, and throughout this chain and throughout this protein. These peptide bonds will help to keep the amino acids together and form the structure of the protein. Okay? And so realizing that the ribosome is really where this is taking place and where this is creating these bonds between the amino acids. So this finding supports the proposal that RNA molecules generated the first proteins and such. And so again, this is a part of this RNA world model hypothesis of life occurring here on the planet and allowing for reproduction to occur and reproducing cells of their own kind as far as that's concerned. You'll see here as far as the, so you see how complex this is? Do you see how that there's a lot to this, folks? And so we're just kind of, covering in a very short period of time some major theories that are thought as far as present within the evolutionary theory. Very complex, very challenging. Just something that we would hope to challenge you all to think about them and to try and process as far as understanding that this is really upon which biological theories and biological sciences are using as the foundation of information. You'll see here as far as these protocells, again, these initial cells present within the beginning of life here on the planet, right? There was need to be a component that would actually keep the material within the cell in place in order to create this cell, these protocells. And so the lipid bilayer membrane, this is what helps to organize the organic molecules within that protocell and within the cells that we have today, whether they are prokaryotic cells or eukaryotic cells. Again, prokaryotic cells, membrane-bound organelles. So think of like the endoplasmic reticulum for smooth ER or rough ER. Rough ER, the packaging and synthesis of proteins. Smooth ER for carbohydrates, and then also the Golgi apparatus. The smooth ER for the lipids, lipid synthesis. And those are, again, membrane-bound organelles, and then the Golgi apparatus, which will help to package both carbohydrates and proteins for distribution throughout the cell, outside of the cell, on the plasma membrane, or also lipid production, Golgi apparatus. Those are examples of membrane-bound organelles. In the case of a prokaryotic organism, no membrane-bound organelles. Okay, there's a difference. So you see here, as far as these lipid bilayer here, this fatty membrane that keeps all the components within. You'll see here, as far as the thoughts behind the theory, as far as how this could have occurred, how this could have been produced. When suspended in water, these fats, these phospholipids, self-assemble into a bilayer membranes that can round up into these closed vesicles called liposomes, surrounding an inner space. So let me just show you. When I showed you here this image earlier today, look at this here, folks. Do you see this here? See this? It's called a micelle. That's what they're talking about as far as initially what's taking place. If we have these phospholipids present, they will all come together and come together in such a manner that you see these tails and you see these purple pink heads. The heads are hydrophilic. The tails are hydrophobic. So the tails do not want to be interacting with water. Okay, and so you'll see here that when we have a bunch of these phospholipids just coming together on their own, they will then come together in such a manner that they will keep the tails, which are hydrophobic, water fearing, right, towards the center of this structure, and that they'll only allow for then the heads to interact with the water environment, the outside. Here you're seeing this phospholipid bilayer. This would be extracellular, this would be intracellular, inside of the cell, outside of the cell. This fat would comprise and compose the membrane that's going to keep all the cytoplasm within. But I wanted you to see this micelle. That's what this micelle is, as far as what they're talking about here. Yeah, what we're talking about here is that when suspended in water, these phospholipids self-assemble into that, like that micelle, where they all like allow for the tails, which don't want to interact with water, to enter into the center portion of that globe of this, the heads, which are those, like those little round represented in that image there. Those are water hydrophilic, and they don't mind interacting with water. So suspended with water, the tails will go inward, the heads will be on the outside. There'll be these closed vesicles, right? Now, surrounding an inner space. So this, we're talking about the basics of the beginning of cellular life production of these living cells. Concentration of the organic molecules present within such of these vesicles could have stimulated expansion and fragmentation, providing a primitive form of reproduction, allowing for these primitive cells, these protocells, to reproduce upon and create more of themselves. And again, know that again, we're talking about millions of years as far as evolution is concerned. Okay. Early membranes would have likely have been heterogeneous mixtures of fatty acids, so different types of fats initially, instead of just these phospholipids per se, but different types of fats coming together with whatever other fats had resulted from this abiotic synthesis reactions, where we're taking non-living material and producing organic compounds and such. Early membranes would also have been more permeable to other molecules. So interesting also in that, because why are they saying this as far as being more permeable to other molecules? Because they're saying that initially, for then these organelles to be present within these protocells, these specific types of structures present in order to perform certain functions, the membrane itself would have to allow for more materials to enter in order to create and form these organelles and such, okay? And in order for, so permeability just allows for, so permeability just means and semi-permeable would mean that it doesn't allow for everything just to pass through this membrane, right? Certain substances can pass through, and know that in living cells now we have proteins, we have carbohydrates present. In order for stability to be present as far as carbohydrates are concerned, and as far as proteins present within the membrane, allowing for material to pass in and out of the cell, okay? So very important as far as allowing for material to enter in and out of the cell. And in the case of these protocells, very important, because then in order to then create the atmosphere for organelles to be formed and allow for then reproduction to occur and to allow for a cell that is successful, right? A more successful combination of components in order to reproduce itself in like kind, and as far as through natural selection, allow for then that cell to continue on in existence. Okay, yeah, so that permeability there, and we're going to stop in just a moment here. I just want to finish this slide. Protocells would have to have spontaneously divided their membrane and interior volume into two or more smaller components and such. And so realizing that, again, like I said, regarding the structures present within a cell, you know, permeability, allowing for different types of organic chemicals to come in and enter into the cell, these protocells, these early cells, and allow for then conditions to be right present within, in order then to also allow for the division of the membrane and the early reproduction to occur of these early protocells. Again, there's a lot of complexity here, folks. It's not just simple matters that are involved in this very basic functions and structures of life as we know it today. Yeah. All right. So let's stop for today here.